I am a woman who works a 9 to 5 at a marketing firm, and for years I used the same shortcut on my way home, a Walmart that sits between the highway exit and my apartment complex. I stopped there almost every evening to pick up something simple for dinner, sometimes a head of lettuce, sometimes a rotisserie chicken, sometimes a pint of ice cream I did not need but wanted. The store had a steady hum of fluorescent light, carts squeaking across polished tile, and a faint scent of cleaning solution mixed with the metallic tang of the pharmacy counter. It felt like a small, predictable island after a long day at work, until it did not. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other, so anonymity in the city felt like both a relief and a risk. After a relationship ended 2 years ago, I learned to value quiet routines. I live alone now, and my evenings are structured. Leave the office around 5:30, stop at the store, walk the same route to my car, listen to a short podcast on the drive home, cook, and then collapse into a show until sleep. That routine was a comfort. The Walmart became part of that pattern. It knew me in the way of places that see you often but never ask for anything in return. I felt safe because the routine was familiar and because the store was busy at predictable times. The people who worked there wore name tags and uniforms and smiled for reasons that seemed ordinary. As a person who pays attention to details, I noticed staff by name. Carlos worked produce most evenings and always arranged the fruit with a careful hand. Emma was at the registers on Tuesdays and always handed me my receipt with a single nod. Jason from hardware seemed to have an answer for every question. Those small recognitions made the place feel like a neighborhood spot rather than a corporate chain. That comfort would become the frame that made the strange moments sharper. It is hard to describe how trust accumulates in small increments until one event breaks the trust and you realize how brittle it was all along. The first encounter happened over something banal. I was in produce picking a mango when a man wearing a gray polo with the store logo said hi. He introduced himself as Carlos, though I already knew his name from his tag. The exchange was polite and brief at first. "Hey, how is your day going?" "Long, just grabbing something for dinner." "You come here a lot, right? I see you around." "Yeah, I work nearby, so I stop by often." "Do you live close to the apartments down the street?" "Pretty close. Why do you ask?" At first, his questions seemed small, like friendly chat, and the air smelled of citrus and cold mist from the refrigerated displays. The fluorescent light washed everything flat, and the sound of a distant price scanner beeped like a metronome. I answered with the same politeness I would give to any neighbor. When he asked if I lived alone and whether I was seeing anyone, the tone shifted. His smile lingered longer than necessary, and he tilted his head as if cataloging information. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern repeated. I would enter the store, grab something, and Carlos would be in a nearby aisle. He started to show up during different shifts. Each time the encounter grew a little more pointed. Once he said I seemed familiar in a way that made me uncomfortable. Another time he asked what I wore to work, as if trying to imagine me outside the store. The details were small, but they piled up like weight on a shelf. "Carlos, do you ever come in the mornings?" "Not really, I do evenings." "Carlos, I usually work the late shift. Maybe I will see you again." "Maybe." "Carlos, if you ever want to grab a coffee after work, let me know." "I am not interested." "All right, but I had to ask." There was a rustle of plastic bags and the faint hum of a stocking cart nearby. The light seemed lower, the air a little warmer under the racks. Each question chipped away at the feeling that the store was impersonal and safe. The escalation became clearer when the questions moved from vague to specific. He asked about the bus routes I took, whether I parked in the far lot, and where I parked on particularly busy nights. Once he asked if I worked alone in my office, and then which building number I went to. I remember the way his eyes moved to watch my hands as I signed a coupon, how his voice softened when he asked about my weekend plans. The privacy of my life felt like a map he was drawing slowly from casual remarks. The change was not dramatic in a single exchange, but cumulative in a way that set my nerves on edge. "Carlos, do you live in Building 7? I prefer not to give out my address. I only ask because I thought you might need a ride one day. Thank you, but I have my own transportation. Okay, just looking out. The tile under my shoes felt cold, and my breath caught slightly. The smell of produce faded, and the store noise became a background static that made his presence louder. It was the sense of being observed in a place where observation should have been anonymous. If this story makes your heart race now, you are not alone. Many of us have felt that blend of anger and fear when someone who seemed harmless keeps showing up. Have you ever had someone in a store make you uncomfortable? Tell me in a line or two what happened and what kind of store it was. Start your comment with the words, "in the store," so others can filter stories quickly. Sharing helps others notice patterns and keeps people safer. When you tell your short version, you help build a record that can push change. Now I will get back to what happened to me that night after I left the store. One evening after a later than usual shift, I left with a bag of half-priced sushi and the sky already dark. The parking lot was sparse, and the air smelled of exhaust and wet asphalt from a recent rain. I walked briskly to my car, and when I reached the row where I parked, I saw a familiar sedan idling 2 rows over. My chest tightened. I could see a man inside on his phone. The car eased forward at the same time I started my engine and pulled into the aisle behind me. My hands were cool on the wheel, and the radio played a song I could not name. I decided to take back roads instead of the highway in case he followed. At the first light, I turned left and then immediately made another left to double back and used a small loop I knew well. At the next stop, the sedan was still behind me. Me: "Sir, are you following me?" Driver: "No, I just left the store too. I think we have the same route." Me: "I did not take the highway." "Oh, I did not either. Small world." Me: "Okay, I am going to call someone." Driver: "You do that. Have a good night." The engine noise felt louder than usual, and the scent of cold air filled the car. My heart hammered in my throat, and I kept checking the rearview mirror. The driver accelerated briefly as if to see if I would pick up speed, and then slowed down. I managed to lose him by circling a grocery store lot and parking near a lamppost where a security guard often smoked. That night, I went back inside and asked to speak with the manager. Her name was Sarah, and she had been at the customer service desk. She looked at me with a kind flatness I have seen in people who have to translate worry into procedure. I told her the sequence of encounters and how I had been followed. Nate from security came over from the back, and his expression tightened when I mentioned the car description. The exchange was brisk but formal, and I felt simultaneously relieved and dismissed. Me: "I think the man from produce has been following me." Sarah: "Do you have any proof of harassment right now?" I do not have proof, but I have repeated interactions, and he followed my car from the lot. Nate: "We can pull footage and review it. Do you remember the time you left?" Around 9:30. We will check and let you. We know. We take this seriously. Nate: "If you want, we can walk you to your vehicle." Sarah: "We can also update our shift notes." The lights in the customer service area hummed, and the paper on Sarah's desk smelled faintly of printer ink. Nate wrote down my information and promised to alert the floor staff that I would call if anything else happened. Their faces communicated concern in a professional way. I left feeling that something official existed now, even if it felt thin. Over the next month, I collected small incidents like stamps in a passport. I noticed Carlos at a specific time more often. I found a note in my cart once that said, "Nice to see you," that was not placed by any employee who I could identify. I started bringing friends along when I could, and I began to document everything in a small notebook. Other employees noticed. Emma mentioned in passing that a man had been asked to stay out of certain aisles. Jason from hardware said he had seen the same man ask about where customers parked. Maria, a cashier I started talking to, said she had filed a report about the same behavior a few weeks earlier. Greg, who runs front end, told me that surveillance had been flagged, but footage had gaps during changeover. Emma: "We have seen him around." Me: "Has he been told to stop approaching customers?" Emma: "We told him not to linger near the registers." Maria: "I filed something last month, but it took a while to get traction." Greg: "We will escalate if you want to make an official complaint." Each of those names carried a reaction and a memory, and made the pattern feel less like paranoia and more like a recurring problem in the store. The scent of coffee from the break room mixed with the rubber smell of carts. The soft click of heels and plastic bags underscored conversations. Moment of tension 1. I was waiting in the self-checkout aisle and heard footsteps behind me slow down, then stop. I turned and saw the same man watching a vending machine. He moved closer and asked if I had seen the new flavor of chips. My pulse lurched. He then asked for my number again, more insistently, and when I refused, he said I must be rude for not giving it to him. The sound of the barcode scanner suddenly seemed distant and muffled, and my fingers tightened around my card. I stepped away, and a younger woman named Tanya intercepted with a smile and a question about a coupon. The man shrugged and walked off. For a long time, my hands trembled, and I replayed every detail to find what I missed. The fifth encounter I recount happened on a night shift when the store was nearly empty and the lights seemed too bright for the quiet. I was buying cleaning supplies when I heard a sharp whisper across the aisle. A man had approached a teenage employee named Lisa and used a line that made her uneasy. He asked where she lived and if she worked alone. Lisa froze and called for a manager. The man left at a fast clip, and he bumped into a stack of laundry baskets on his way out, scattering them like a sudden clatter of plates. I stepped in and spoke with Lisa and with the manager Mark, who had returned from the loading dock. The dialogue that followed was quick and had the rhythm of people trying to convert fear into action. Me: "Are you okay?" Lisa: "I am fine. I did not know what to say." Mark: "Did he touch you?" "No, but he asked where I lived and said he was new to the area. We need to make a report." Mark: "I will log it and inform security. Please make sure the cameras are checked." "We will do that now." The smell of detergent was sharp and the fluorescent lights hummed. Lisa kept rubbing her wrist as if to remind herself she had not been physically harmed. Her eyes were red from holding back fear. The manager promised a report and a call to the local precinct if we wanted to proceed. At that moment, the store felt like a small city where ordinary transactions could unexpectedly reveal danger. Moment of tension 2. I walked to my car after putting a few things in the trunk and noticed footprints in the wet gravel leading around the side of my vehicle. The overhead lamp flickered. I could hear my own breath and the hushed, distant laugh of 2 teenagers by the cart return. I fumbled for my keys without looking and felt a presence near the rear passenger door. I did not turn. I accelerated and drove out of the lot with my hands white on the wheel and tears stinging the corners of my eyes. The radio was dead silent, and the dark seemed thick as wool until I merged into the main road. In the weeks that followed, I collected witness statements, asked Greg to set aside archival footage, and went to the police station to file a report. Officer Hill took my statement with a steady voice and a pad of paper. He was kind and clear, and he explained the steps the department could take. He said they could try to identify the vehicle and run plates if footage showed it. He suggested we coordinate with store security to preserve tapes and to get a better description of the suspect. In one meeting, Sarah seemed genuinely apologetic and promised to retrain staff on when to escalate interactions with customers. Nate bumped up patrols in the lot and said he would escort any employee who felt unsafe to their car after a shift. The formal acknowledgments helped, but did not erase the sense of being watched. Moment of tension 3. Late one night after a long meeting, I walked from the parking area toward my apartment, and a man pulled up in his car and slowed beside me. He asked if I needed a ride. I said no. He kept driving slowly alongside me as I picked up my pace. I could taste metal in my mouth, and my phone felt hot in my hand as I hit call and put the call on speaker so the ring could be heard. He glared and then sped away, but not before swerving close. The sound of tires on wet asphalt lingered like an echo. I ran the last block and felt my legs burn with adrenaline. I also want to tell 2 short vignettes that reinforce the same pattern. A young mother named Maria told me her child was nearly led away in the toy aisle by a man who said he could buy the toy if she came with him. Maria confronted him and called store security. The man claimed he was buying the toy for his niece and left when several customers turned to watch. Another customer named Greg described a man who had asked to see receipts at the self-checkout in a way that made him insist he was an undercover manager. Greg said he felt manipulative behavior and reported it. Both left a residue of unease in the store air. Months after the initial incidents, the store began to change in small ways. Sarah and management approved additional lighting in the lot, and Nate assigned a security officer to walk the lot during evening closures. The police kept a record, and Officer Hill called me after a week to say they had an open investigation and asked if I could come identify a possible suspect in footage. I watched hours of grainy images of aisles and carts and lights, and at one point a figure I thought matched the man in produce lingered near the checkout and then circled the same row where I parked. Those frames were a mixture of relief and frustration. There was corroboration, but not a clear arrest. A month after I first reported the pattern, I still avoided one particular entrance and sometimes asked a friend to wait with me while I walked to my car. The presence of friends felt like armor. 3 months later, I had stopped going in the evenings at all and instead shopped on weekend mornings when the store had more staff and more shoppers. I felt that moving my routine was a small surrender, and yet it kept me safe. 6 months later, there was a community meeting at a nearby coffee shop where other customers who had felt uncomfortable at the store shared experiences. Names like Carlos, Emma, Jason, Maria, Nate, Sarah, and Officer Hill became shorthand for people who had acted and who had listened. The store published a notice about reviewing safety protocols and adding staff training. It did not erase what happened, but it made public the fact that these incidents were not isolated. 1 month after the events, I still woke to a sudden awareness in quiet moments when I was walking home. I would replay the angle a man took when he asked a question and the color of his polo. I would check my car before entering, and I would keep a small light on in my apartment for a while because light felt like a guard. The store had posted a sign that a customer complaint had been filed and that they were reviewing surveillance footage. I felt a small amount of validation in that notice. 3 months after I filed formal reports, there was a meeting with store management and a representative from corporate. They acknowledged that some staff had not recognized the escalation early enough and committed to mandatory training on de-escalation and customer boundaries. They promised clearer procedures for documenting incidents and for escalating to law enforcement. Officer Hill followed up with me and said they had a person of interest in the general area, but that charges require stronger evidence. The process was slow. I slept with my phone near my pillow and left lights on more often. I still cooked and did my shopping, but at times I chose different stores or daytime windows. That adjustment felt like both caution and a small retraction of freedom. 6 months after everything began, I found that my routine had rearranged itself into something less predictable. I met a small group of neighbors at a community safety meeting led by Officer Hill and a local council member. We exchanged stories and practical tips, and some people organized a walking group for evening commutes. The store installed brighter lighting and updated a few camera angles, but I also learned that changes take time and persistence. My feelings shifted from raw fright to a steady vigilance that is now part of my evening rituals. I still feel a twinge of anxiety when I see produce stacked in a familiar way, or when I hear a voice ask where I live. But I also feel an odd empowerment because I acted, because I documented, because I asked for help. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, here are a few practical things I would recommend based on what worked for me. First, document everything. Keep times, descriptions, names, a small notebook or notes in your phone. Second, involve witnesses when you can. A friend walking with you or a nearby customer can change the dynamic. Third, speak to management clearly and ask them to log incidents and to review footage. Fourth, file a police report, even if it feels like a hassle. Having that official record matters later. Fifth, consider small personal changes that feel reasonable, like parking near an exit, keeping your keys handy, and sharing your route with someone you trust. These are not solutions to the problem, but they can reduce immediate risks. This story is one of 5 encounters. That, taken together, changed how I think about routine trips to the store. The pattern of small interactions that escalate, the way staff and customers respond, and the slow bureaucratic steps that follow showed me how fragile a sense of safety can be in an ordinary space. If this account resonated with you, please subscribe for more real stories and community resources. I share details not to frighten, but to prepare and to build solidarity. Tell your experience in the comments, starting with "in the store," so others can find similar stories. People listening to each other is how we spot patterns and demand better protections. Remember that action matters and that small interventions can have large effects. Stay safe and trust your instincts.